Hello, I'm Esther Githu-Ewart. Welcome to Africa 54. Here's what's coming up. After a 5-story building collapsed, rescuers scrambled to find survivors in the South African coastal city of George. Nigeria initiates prosecutions against corruption, marking a turning point for African democracy. And what's ahead for Joe Biden and Donald Trump with only 6 months left before the U.S. presidential election? All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. We begin in South Africa, where rescuers in the city of George on Tuesday are searching through the rubble of a 5-story building. The unfinished building collapsed Monday afternoon, killing at least 5 and trapping dozens more. Colleen Dana, Chief of Disaster Management for the Western Cape Province, says responders are focusing on areas where they are hearing people. Authorities say the rescuers' priority is to get all those still trapped out, then begin a process of lifting the different floors of each other. The work is expected to continue until the weekend. Officials say 26 people have been taken from the debris, 5 of whom have died. Authorities also say 49 others are still unaccounted for. Nigeria is cracking down on electoral fraud, marking a turning point for African democracy. After the turbulent 2023 general elections, the country has initiated prosecutions against offenders aiming to restore credibility. Emeka Gibson reports from Abuja.
In a significant move, 196 suspects are now facing prosecution for offense during Nigeria general election. The Nigeria Bar Association, alongside the Independent National Election Commission, INEC, announced large case hearing in court across Nigeria Monday, 4th March 2024, emphasizing the country's readiness to tackle electoral corruption. Officials from INEC and political parties are among those facing trial. Citizens like Stephen John have widely praised this move as a step in the right direction.
For us to sanitize our electoral system, there is a need for those who break the law during elections to be prosecuted, so that will serve as a deterrent for others who want to go the same route.
Electoral fraud has long plagued Nigeria, eroding trust in its democracy. And that's why Nigerians like Igwe Friday are still skeptical.
In a country like Nigeria, election violence, when you take the matter to court, before you know, the matter will not go anywhere.
This marks the first time Nigeria pursued charges against electoral offender despite constitutional provision. The Nigeria Bar Association is providing a free legal service to INEC to ensure the effective prosecution of those who undermine the electoral process. Out of the arrests made by the Nigeria police during the 2023 general poll, 215 cases were filed, with 197 of them being electoral offense. All cases are tried in the regular court system, as Nigeria hasn't established an independent electoral offense commission yet. Jide Ojo, an electoral and governance expert, cited political interference as a major obstacle in fighting electoral crimes.
But let's not be too optimistic. These characters in the political class are the primary beneficiary of the electoral offenses. So they are not in a hurry. Because making stringent law or having to establish an independent commission to see to prosecution, it's like you are shooting yourself in the foot. So they are not in a hurry to ensure that this electoral offenses commission is established through the instrumentality of the law.
Various offenses include conspiracy, vote intimidation, vote buying, and violence were observed during the last election. In Nigeria, electoral crime like a defined trial timeline. Unlike election dispute resolution, leading to prolonged legal processes lasting months or even years. While cases are underway, Ojo emphasized the importance of breaking the culture of impunity to rebuild trust.
There must be an elite consensus to do away with this issue of electoral offenses. It does not portray us as a civilized people, as a democracy.
As Africa's most populated country in Africa, Nigeria's electoral integrity holds immense significance for the continent. The recent Electoral Act reform of 2022 has laid the groundwork for justice and transparency, offering hope for a future of credible, free and fair election in Nigeria. Will Nigeria government bring it to fruition, the next round of presidential election set for February 2027 might bring some answer. Gibson Emeka for VOA News, Abuja, Nigeria.
Coming up Wednesday in our corruption series, officials in Zambia say corruption is rife within government agencies, in particular the payment of kickbacks to access services. Zambia's health sector is no exception, as authorities warn of stern actions against those found guilty of the illegal practice. Residents of Washington, D.C. are gearing up for the June 4th Democratic primary election. One of the candidates running for re-election as the U.S. Shadow Representative for the District of Columbia is Adeoye Oye Owolewa. He's a Nigerian-American politician and pharmacist advocating for DC statehood and ensuring that all residents of Washington have full voting representation in the U.S. Congress. Owolewa joins me in the studio. Oye, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you for having me.
Big question is, what changes if Washington, D.C. becomes a state?
Yes, if D.C. becomes the 51st state, all the residents in the district will have a voting right in Congress. We'll have 700,000 people being able to vote on national policies, we'll be able to control our own budget, and we'll be able to pass our own laws without congressional interference.
And so far, what would you say you have accomplished for the people of the District of Columbia since being elected? I remember way back in 2021.
It seems like yesterday. We've accomplished a whole lot. Number one, we help returning citizens get their records cleared and get jobs to improve public safety. We've gone to classrooms, getting people interested in statehood and careers in D.C. Lastly, we've helped minority business owners learn how to get contracts, grants, and certifications to help them scale up.
Well, you know, we have many Africans in the diaspora. Many of them live right here in Washington, D.C.
Yes.
So how do you ensure that the African diaspora are also included in the political development, in the developmental issues that also, in a way, impact the continent of Africa?
That's a great question. We hold people accountable. We're not only having conversations here in D.C., but beyond. We've had people from Nigeria come here and understand that the diasporans are critical. Nigerian diasporans give $20 billion in repatriated dollars back to the home country. So not only do our money need to make sense, but we also need to make sure we're heard. And also get people here involved in local politics and beyond.
And what do you hope to achieve if you get elected again?
Yes, once re-elected, we hope to get more young people involved. The world is a smaller place because of all of our digital options. We want to make sure we reach people that previous generations couldn't get access to, and make sure that young people understand that statehood is not only for DC residents, but for everyone across this country and planet.
What are some of the issues you find difficult to pass through in terms of legislature that affect the people of DC?
That's a great question. Because DC is not a state, a lot of legislation doesn't have a federal cutout or money cutout for us, whether it's the CARES Act and we got less than half the money, or currently there's legislation that gives money to all 50 states, but sometimes ignore us. What we're trying to do is go to Congress, go to Capitol Hill, and make sure that DC gets its fair share of dollars.
You are a young representative, and I imagine a lot of young people looking up to you. What do you hear from the youth living in Washington, D.C.? What do they want to see change for them?
They want to see a reflective government. They want to see someone that shows up every day and not just voting time. So having opportunities to come see you, having opportunities to knock on doors, not only allow them to feel empowered, but also feel involved. This office is underfunded, but because of community groups, because of young people, because of people wanting to get involved, we've been able to do things that people wouldn't imagine us do.
There's always one interesting thing when I came here is seeing license tags on cars, taxation without representation. Yes. Hoping that is going to be a thing of the past. We never know. What do you think?
I think it's possible. I mean, we fought a whole revolution over this very same issue of taxation without representation. And right now, I believe this is an awareness issue. It's not just politics, it's about people in California, people in Texas, people in Georgia, people in Maryland understand what's going on in DC and how our rights impact their ability to see the country they want to live in.
Thank you very much for letting us know where we are in the District of Columbia. Oye Adeoye Oye Owolewa is a Democrat running for re-election as the U.S. Shadow Representative for the District of Columbia. Israel's military says its forces on Tuesday have seized control of the Gaza side of the Rafah crossing between the Gaza Strip and Egypt. This action comes one day after ordering tens of thousands of Palestinians to leave the area. Meanwhile, negotiations continue on a possible ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. VOA's Anita Powell reports from the White House.
Tension in Rafah after Israel signaled its intention, over Washington's objections, to launch a ground assault on the packed town at Gaza's southern point. And tension in Washington amid reports that Israel and Hamas were close to a ceasefire deal Monday. Jordan's king lunched privately Monday with U.S. President Joe Biden, and the administration said Gaza was discussed. Biden also called Israel's leader by phone Monday morning. The White House said its wishes are clear.
We want to get these hostages out. We want to get a ceasefire in place for 6 weeks. We want to increase humanitarian assistance. And the last thing that I want to do is say anything at this podium that's going to put that process at risk.
In Gaza, residents celebrated at Monday's news that Hamas had accepted an Egyptian-Qatari ceasefire proposal. The State Department was more skeptical about whether a deal had, in fact, been reached.
A ceasefire is absolutely achievable. There has been a deal on the table, a proposal on the table that would achieve an immediate ceasefire and the release of hostages. Now, as for Hamas's response, which I think gets to your question, again, I don't want to characterize it in any sort of detail until we've had a chance to review it in depth and talk with our partners in the region about it.
Meanwhile, Israel's military has told Rafah residents to evacuate ahead of a ground operation.
We examine every answer and reply very seriously and find every possibility regarding the negotiations for the return of the hostages to their homes as a central task as quickly as possible. And at the same time, we continue our operations in the Gaza Strip and will continue to do so.
The United Nations expressed concerns over an incursion into Rafah.
Any escalation of hostilities resulting from a full-scale incursion into Rafah will push residents and displace people currently living there past their breaking point.
And the White House expressed concerns about civilians after what appeared to be aerial strikes there on Monday.
It doesn't matter whether it's missiles or rockets, things that kill innocent people, that's not okay. And again, the president made it clear that we don't want to see operations in Rafah that put at risk those 1.5 million people that are there.
It's those people who today are caught in the middle of all this. Anita Powell, VOA News, the White House.
For more on the Israel-Hamas war, I'm joined from here in Washington by Bruce Pine, an American lawyer specializing in constitutional and international law. Bruce, welcome again to Africa 54. Let's start by asking you, what are the prospects of a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas now that Israeli forces have seized the Rafah border crossing?
I think they're very slim. Israel's already invested a huge amount of military planning and surveillance, probably targeting what they believe are Hamas, aimed for extermination in their own words. So I don't think the likelihood is very high. I think a huge block is that the Hamas and the Arab states view ceasefire as a step towards this two-state solution. Israel has adamant opposed to any two-state solution. But you can't have either have one state or two states. And that Israel would view anything less than a complete expulsion of any Hamas presence in Gaza, which in my judgment is not feasible in another year or two, if not more, is simply not going to happen. Prime Minister Netanyahu is not feeling pressure, to come up with some kind of ceasefire. He's getting pressured to have exchange of hostages, and a hostage exchange in isolation probably is viable, but that wouldn't diminish the plans and the execution as we speak of the Israeli assault on Rafah crossing.
What do you think would be the possible, sort of agreement or acceptable agreement between Israel and Hamas in order to come to, to say there's no more war, we've got to end this?
I don't think there is an acceptable agreement. That's why we don't have one. And remember, we're talking today about a ceasefire and hostage exchange. That was on the table, 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago. And we probably had a half dozen or a dozen stories before your story today saying, well, ceasefire is around the corner, we're going to make an announcement. When you have irreconcilable ambitions and goals, you're not going to get an agreement. And in my view, you come back a month from now, you could have me on, there's still not going to be a ceasefire, there'll still be hostages, because there's not an incentive on either side to bring this to a conclusion. Hamas believes that it's, in some sense, gaining because the antipathy towards the Israeli incursion is giving it more credibility among Palestinians. Israel believes that it's gaining because Mr. Netanyahu continues to have support for an overwhelming proportion of the Israeli electorate. There's no likelihood there's going to be new elections and he's out of office. So they both have, at the political level, incentive to keep the war ongoing, even if the people suffer as a consequence. But leaders decide on war, not people.
Well, Bruce, we're going to have to leave it there. This is going to be a long story coming every day, perhaps, and we'll get you back on the show for more analysis.
Thank you.
We appreciate your insight, Bruce. Our thanks to Bruce Fein, an American lawyer specializing in constitutional and international law. There are 6 months left in the U.S. presidential race between Democrat President Joe Biden and Republican candidate Donald Trump. Here's VOA's Scott Stearns.
President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump have 6 months left to persuade American voters to give them a second term. Trump will spend some of that time in state or federal court answering 4 separate indictments on charges that include unlawful retention of national defense information and falsifying business records. He says prosecutors are interfering in the election.
Everything was legal. And they're doing this because it's for politics. They want to get Biden elected. That's the only reason.
The court appearances are reducing Trump's time campaigning, but he says what he calls a political hoax is only making him more popular with voters.
It's a terrible, terrible thing happening in our country. And hopefully, November 5th, the most important day in the history of our country, in my opinion, that's called Election Day. Hopefully it's going to change because these people are destroying our country.
The Republican Party last nominated Trump for president at its semi-virtual 2020 convention in North Carolina. This year's Republican convention is in July in the state of Wisconsin. Before then, Trump will need to choose a new running mate. Among those he's believed to be considering for vice president are Florida Senator Marco Rubio, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, South Carolina Senator Tim Scott, and New York Representative Elise Stefanik. As the incumbent president, Biden has the advantage of White House events to keep voters' attention on the campaign trail. Biden is becoming more pointed in his attacks on Trump, while claiming credit for a stronger economy.
Construction of new factories has more than doubled in our administration. Meanwhile, Donald Trump still thinks windmills cause cancer. That's what he said. By the way, remember when he was trying to deal with COVID, he said, just inject a little bleach in your veins. He missed it, all went to his hair.
The Democratic Party last nominated Biden for president at its semi-virtual 2020 convention in Wisconsin. This year's Democratic convention is in August in the state of Illinois. Biden is running again with Vice President Kamala Harris, who's been campaigning for restoring federal abortion protections that were ended when the U.S. Supreme Court overturned the case Roe v. Wade in 2022.
Donald Trump was the president who took away the protections of Roe. Joe Biden will be the president who puts the protections of Roe back in place.
Before November's election day, Biden and Trump are expected to debate. Both men say they're ready. No date's been set. Scott Stearns, VOA News.
Let us know what you think about Africa 54 and all our VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. Still to come, a Tanzanian hospital is training ambassadors to look for untreated obstetric fistula patients. We'll have the details. Stay with us.
This week on Straight Talk Africa, we examine the environmental crisis and how journalists on the continent are trying to make a difference. Join me, Vincent Makori, and my guests for an in-depth discussion on how freedom of the press can impact the course of climate change.
In times of change, when the world seems uncertain and what we hear doesn't reflect what we see, we seek the truth. When we are told only part of the story, we lose trust. In moments of crisis, our dreams, hopes, and wishes for a better tomorrow depends on a free press. At Voice of America, we bring you the stories that people take risks to see. We connect the world and unite it with truth. At Voice of America, we show you the whole picture.
Season 4, rocking with the best. Rocking with the best. Season 4, rocking with the best.
In other news, Togolese President Faure Gnassingbé has signed a controversial new constitution that eliminates presidential elections, a move that opponents say will allow him to extend his family's 6-decade-long rule. Under the new legislation, Parliament will have the power to choose the president, doing away with direct elections. A coalition in Nigeria is warning against possible defense pacts with the United States and France. The warning notice, signed by 5 civil society groups and a former chairman of Nigeria's Independent National Electoral Commission, came in an open letter to Nigeria's president and the National Assembly. The coalition, without providing evidence, accused the United States and France of lobbying authorities in the Gulf of Guinea countries, especially Nigeria, to redeploy troops expelled from the Sahel states. And Uganda is set to repatriate the remains of 2 Ugandan murderers who were executed more than a century ago for refusing to renounce Christianity. A Roman Catholic society, also known as the Missionaries of Africa, sent the remains of 2 of the murderers to Rome, where the Catholics were later canonized. They are to be displayed at the Uganda's Murderers University. The World Health Organization estimates that about 2 million women across sub-Saharan Africa and in Asia are living with untreated obstetric fistula because of misconceptions and shame. A Tanzanian hospital is training ambassadors who look for patients and help them access free treatment. Saida Swale reports from Dar es Salaam.
At the recent Women Lift Health Global Conference in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, more than 1,000 women discussed ways of global action to help close the gender gap in health leadership. Women Lift Health is an international group working to expand women's leadership in healthcare to improve health outcomes.
We live in a world where women make up 70% of the health workforce around the world. They are the backbone. But they only hold 25% or less of senior leadership positions.
Brenda Msangi is among those who attended the conference. She is the first female chief executive officer of the CCBRT hospital. She has introduced holistic approaches to the healthcare industry and created a program that finds fistula patients who often seclude themselves in villages.
We have trained more than 500 ambassadors in Tanzania, and it's really across the country. So whenever they come across such women, they give us a call. We have a call center here dedicated for that.
Mary Maziku is one of them. She had her first baby at the age of 17. The baby was a stillbirth, and during labor, Maziku suffered a fistula, a tear between the birth canal and the bladder or rectum. Untreated, fistulas allow urine and waste to seep uncontrolled from a woman's body. As a result, many patients become ostracized and isolated.
When I first got fistula, people would tell me it wasn't treatable and that I wouldn't heal. They wanted to take me to a witch doctor.
Maziku lost hope of recovery. Then she learnt about the Comprehensive Community-Based Rehabilitation in Tanzania, or CCBRT, a non-profit hospital that offers treatment for fistula patients.
After recovery, I'm now okay. I was lucky to get trained at the Mabinti Center, where I am now employed.
The Mabinti Center, a Swahili word meaning ladies at the CCBRT hospital, helps women who have recovered from fistula find their footing in society. Here they learn money-earning skills such as making bags and the country's famous Mabinti dolls. The treatment is offered at no cost, but many women don't seek help because there is lack of awareness of the condition and treatment, which the Mabinti Center is trying to counter.
We need to mobilize resources to ensure that no woman is left behind just because they cannot afford to pay for these costs. And this is really the driver of our CCBRT started being very intentional in breaking those two barriers of creating awareness, but also covering all the cost, that it should not be a barrier for the women to still suffer for this condition.
The Women Lift Health group highlights women such as Msangi and programs like the Mabinti Center, which provides care for hundreds of some of the most vulnerable patients. Saida Swale, Dar es Salaam, Tanzania.
And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.